Hey everybody, I'm Jackie Jing, and I am here with Terry and Jim, and we are doing a spoiler cast on Solo, a Star Wars story. So the key word in there is spoiler. So if you don't want to see spoilers, then press pause and come back later after you've seen Solo. But okay, we all saw it. I'm a huge fan. I know what you guys think.
You're wearing the t-shirt.
I am.
Literally wearing the t-shirt.
Does that give it away? Terry, why don't you start us off and tell us what you thought of the movie?
You know, this movie is fine. Like, I had fun. I had more fun than I thought I would. I woke up that morning when I went to see it and I was like, you know, am I excited about this movie? It's crazy that we have a Star Wars movie coming out so soon after The Last Jedi. But I walked out and I was like, you know, this is really fun. It answers questions I didn't necessarily have about this character, but I came out ready to see another one and ready to see more adventures, which I think is the best that they could hope to accomplish.
Jim, you gave it a 7.
Yeah, I gave it a 7.0 out of 10, and that's considered good on the IGN scale, as it says at the bottom of the review. So I liked the movie. I have some very specific issues with the story of it, but I thought it was very charming. It was very funny. I thought the action was good. Like it won't do anything to damage Star Wars. I think a lot of people, maybe because it had been such a troubled kind of production and all that, that they were thinking it was going to be a train wreck, or I guess a Star Destroyer crash, however you want to put it. But to me, it's a perfectly fine adventure film, and it's funny. And we'll get into the specifics of it. But there were just certain story things and things I wanted to see answered, or at least addressed in a fuller way than I got in the movie, which ultimately held it back for me significantly enough that I was like, I have issues. But
Yeah.
I still gave it a thumbs up.
Okay, 7.0. I was pleasantly surprised. Terry was sitting next to me, and I literally had my arms crossed, and I was like, this is going to be awful. I was like, I love Han Solo. I just did not have a good feeling about the movie.
You had a bad feeling about this?
Sorry, guys. Oh my gosh, we didn't even plan that, folks.
Wow.
Anyways, that was awesome. But then literally we were like 10 minutes in, and I was like tapping Terry, and I was like, this is good. Like, I really like this. So I agree with you guys. I thought that it was charming. I thought that it was cute. I was all on board. So I think that we all liked it. We can say that.
I think the interesting thing is we all, when we started prepping for this, we all disagreed a lot on what we think the strengths and weaknesses are of it. And so I'm curious, like, what other people think seeing the movie as well, because I agree with you that it doesn't damage Star Wars. That's the biggest thing, especially like after The Last Jedi was so divisive. I think people were expecting this to be like, oh, are you going to tarnish the legacy of Han Solo? And I don't think it does that. But does it add to that? Does it really elevate that character and give more to it than we had already? I think that's the big question and what we can dig into.
I will say, I think it's really interesting to see how divisive, or divisive if you're that kind of person, Star Wars has become. Like, it's gone from something that seemed pretty universally loved, and then I guess maybe it started with the prequels, but it seems like in this current crop of things, each one is getting significantly more divisive, and it's kind of to me it's noteworthy in that, you know, remember when we all just loved Star Wars and it was just like, it was fine.
I'll say 2 quick things and then we can get past sort of the summary phase. But my favorite thing about the movie is how much, you know, I know CGI is a big part of this movie, but it felt like it leaned so much on practical effects and practical character design. There's no milking of creatures here, but still, like, it felt like this.
It was still a practical effect, Terry.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, I know that was practical. We weren't going that far, but I did think, like, you know, it felt like this world, like, you could walk into, and I love that, because to me, you know, seeing movies take the time to create something real and lived in instead of just relying on visual effects makes it so much more immersive to me, and I think it helps the movies last longer. And then to your point, Jackie, like, we were sitting next to each other watching this movie, and right before we started, I was like, this movie has one job to do, and it needs to convince you that Alden is Han Solo within seconds. Like, it only has seconds to make you buy that he is that character, and I think it did it, and I think that that's like the biggest win that it can have for all the problems or things we love about it going forward.
Well, that transitions us very nicely into our next question. Did Alden nail it as Han? So I'm gonna start off with you, Jim. Obviously Terry is kind of leaning that she thought he did.
Yeah, I thought, you know, he had a Herculean task. I don't envy any actor having to fill shoes of a character that iconic, that beloved. And I thought he did a fine job with it. He captured enough of sort of Harrison Ford's mannerisms and sort of just body language and even his look, but he still imbued the character with something his own, like this kind of even more of a dopey sweetness and vulnerability than we were used to with Harrison Ford's character, who is supposed to be like 10, 12 years older and obviously had lived a life of more adventure and all that jazz that hardened him a little bit. But I thought he did. I thought he did a good job of not letting himself get destroyed kind of by this role, because imagine if he didn't do a good job, like that would have killed his career, I think.
That's one of the things I love about your review, because Jim did review this movie for us. I love how you do sort of break down, and we've talked about this as well, like the way you think that Alden really got the mannerisms right, because there was all this conversation about how he had an acting coach on set, and people thought that meant, oh, maybe he's having trouble capturing this role. But what I would imagine is it's clear he did his research to not just copy a performance, but like live a performance. And I think, again, that's something you've talked a lot about. It caused me to see that as well when I watched the movie, to like see how he did sort of feel like a younger version of this character, not just, oh, Harrison did this, so I'll do it, but like you can sort of see the nuggets of how this person would end up.
Because
there.
if because it was a very fine line of mimicry, but also giving it some heart and soul. And if he didn't do any mimicry, he could get criticized for that. Like, that's not my Han Solo. He's nothing like him. He doesn't even walk like him, anything. So you have to, and I thought he did a really good job of getting right up to the edge, but still like finding something else.
And it's so smart to start the movie on that sort of like chase sequence as well, because you feel Han there. That's where, again, we were talking about, you need to get that character right at the beginning, and to see him in his prime, like being an expert pilot right from the get-go. It's like a really adrenaline-packed sequence. It introduces us to Han, obviously, and to Qi'ra, but I think really sort of captures the spirit of Han Solo right out the get-go, even though he is sort of like this dope, sweeter version of the character. And interesting, that's sort of like what we disagree on the most, right? It's not where he starts, but where he finishes in this movie.
I mean, by no means do I think he is Harrison Ford's Han. You know what I mean? Like this Alden's Han is charming. He is just cute, a little bit ditzier, more adorable, more naive. But I thought that Alden made it his own. And when I was speaking to him, because I did the junket interviews, I told him that some people in the audience said that they thought that he moved his eyebrows similarly to how Harrison Ford did, and he was kind of talking out of the side of his mouth. And he said that he didn't plan for that, but he did a ton of research. I told you guys he was like a Star Wars pro. So I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't think he tried to copy Harrison Ford so much. I think he took the script, he saw this young, naive boy who is a survivor, and he really made it his own. So
I think for me, the real crux of my main criticism of the movie is that that Han Solo that we met in A New Hope, the one that captured everyone's imagination, and that we follow his story all the way through those three movies up until Force Awakens. That guy that we meet in New Hope is not the character here, but I was kind of hoping to see, in terms of an arc, in terms of the story of getting us, just in my mind, justifying why we're telling Han's story at this particular moment in his life, rather than just like it being a story about how he got his stuff. I kind of wanted to see how he ended up that guy, that bastard really, that we meet the first time where like, I'm not interested in your rebellion, I'm in it for the money, looks out for himself. Because the arc he has in A New Hope is an arc. He goes from being self-interested to being the guy who flies in at the last minute when he was free and clear, but risks it to help them save the day and prove himself a hero, gets his medal and everything for it. So it's like, I kind of wanted to see a little bit more, maybe a lot more in this movie, of how he became hardened by life. Because to me, he's not terribly dissimilar at the end of the movie than he is at the beginning. And he kind of, I wanted to see him sort of evolve a little more rather than just be sort of running in place a little bit.
It's interesting because the three of us have like three very different opinions about this, and I'm curious how much like the people who have also seen it, you guys watching at home, like how you feel about this on the spectrum. Because Jim, you very much, you walked into this movie and you're like, I want to see how Han was, became the person
grittier,
he is.
more selfish,
and
sort of like a Batman Begins or a Casino Royale thing of like, okay, I knew that there were going to be more movies after that, But for a complete story for that one movie, a chapter in that character's life, I wanted a more complete chapter.
And Jackie, you were sort of on the other end of the spectrum, and obviously before this movie came out, we did learn that Alden has been signed on for 3 Han Solo movies. You can see in this movie how they could make it a trilogy or something. They can stretch it out. They already set up a sequel that, as I said at the beginning of this, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'd watch that movie. But you sort of expected going in that he wouldn't end up there, right?
I guess for me, I just wanted to know the history of Han Solo. Like, okay, he grew up as a street rat in Corellia, and who did he have relationships with? How did he meet Chewie? Like, what did their relationship start as? What did it evolve to be? How'd they get the Millennium Falcon? So, like, I felt like this movie answered a lot of those questions that I wanted to. I mean, I totally see where Jim's coming from. I mean, this could have been darker. It could have been grittier. It was fun. You know what I mean? It was just a fun movie that answered questions.
Grittier. I just wanted to see him as a character
Change
change a little bit more, get a little closer, because I didn't feel like dramatic.
Yeah, I feel like you felt like something was missing. Am I wrong? Like you felt like something else had to happen to him before he is the Han Solo that we see in New Hope. You felt like that had not happened.
And I have to give the movie, I mean, I got to cut a little slack on that, because again, like it did go through a massive overhaul, and so we don't know
on the production side.
On the production side of different directors, everything, and very quickly having to rejigger the entire movie. So, you know, maybe my concerns were addressed in that original one, and they're like, maybe it went too far, or whatever. So, you know, being mindful of all that.
I think I'm sort of somewhere in the middle between the two of you, because I agree.
Literally.
Literally. Hey. We planned that. One of your points that you made earlier, actually before we started recording this, is you're like, you know, to the point of like, is this going to be a trilogy of Han Solo stories where at the end of the 3rd movie, Han becomes the person we know at the end of A New Hope? I agree with you with what you said, which is this movie should stand on its own, and you didn't feel like it quite took him far enough. I guess the thing for me is I didn't come into this movie expecting Han would be the Han we knew at the beginning of A New Hope. I didn't, because I think if it was going to be that, it would literally need to end right before that. I did see him having an arc. It wasn't as dramatic an arc as we know. He goes so far into the cynic and the self-interested scoundrel who we meet in A New Hope. But I did think, you know, if Kira and his relationship with Kira is the crux of his story, and it's that betrayal that sort of starts turning him, to compare it to something like Casino Royale, I think we see that play out here. But I do feel like it wasn't the fully self-contained story. It could have been. I guess, I don't know. I'm even torn on that a little bit, because I think that it is a fairly solid film on its own. Yeah. It answers that checklist of questions that you sort of have about Han. What's the Kessel Run? Like, what are parsecs? Just kidding. Yeah. But you know, how'd he get the Millennium Falcon? How'd he meet Lando? Yeah. How'd he meet Chewie? That sort of
I still don't know how he got his vest. Hopefully I get 2 more movies where they explore that.
He stole it from Lando's closet. But I do think in terms of an arc, like we get to, not only do we get to see him change and sort of start down that path, which to me was enough, but I do think that there are some questions that are thrown in there, because he basically starts setting up like the rebellion in his own way in this movie. And those are like little added wrinkles that add more mystery that can be explored in future movies. Like, why would he then fully turn away from them again by the time we pick
I mean,
up in
it makes you wonder though, if we do get 2 more Han Solo movies, isn't it going to be kind of a bummer by the end? Because, like, are we really going to spend now 2 movies watching this guy just kind of grow more cynical and kind of turn his back on everybody?
Spend 3 movies watching a guy become Darth Vader.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Oh gosh, I really like those. But yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see if they do make more stories. Like, what sort of adventures do they take him on, and how is his mettle tested and all that? I think it'll be interesting to see too, like, you know, all these other characters that he meets along the way, and the impact that they had on him, and like, okay, does he run into them again? What happens there? Like, just even Chewbacca. I love that Chewbacca had like something at stake in this movie, that it wasn't just the sidekick. Like, he had he had an agenda. He had an emotional arc too in this movie, and I'm like, Chewbacca, they gave the dog a story.
To me, sending it back to the audience, like I'm really interested to see how the wider audience receives Alden as Han and what they think about sort of the arc as a whole, especially as after Luke was very divisive in his story arc in the Last Jedi. So definitely want to know what you guys think as well in the comments. Do you have a whole bunch of people that you can agree and disagree with up here? So sort of where do you land on it?
Okay, so we talked about Chewbacca a little bit. I do want to talk about the relationship between Han and Chewbacca. Terry, why don't you start us off on this one? Did you think they did a good job? Did you like what they did with Chewie?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many new characters and new versions of old characters that we meet in this movie. I definitely think one of the, like, it's so hard because it's like Chewie or Lando, right?
Yeah.
Who shines brighter in this movie of characters we know? I knew I'd love Lando, but I really love Chewie, and I'm stealing something that Jim has said and Jackie have said before, but I'm saying it for the first time in this this spoiler cast, so it's all mine. But like, Chewie's a character for the first time ever. Chewie's a character who has motivations, an arc. Like, you know, obviously he's like the sidekick, and there's so much we can read into that performance in the past, but it like really felt like they let him be a character, and I was really interested in that, especially as someone who wasn't super invested in his like EU, you know, like other versions of sort of his and Han's origin story. This I was fine just taking fresh.
That is I mean, that's an interesting point, because, you know, for a lot of folks who maybe they didn't read those EU stories or whatever, but kind of through osmosis, if you're a Star Wars fan, you pick up on like, in your mind, right? there's a story of what you thought it was, you know, what it would be and all that. And the movie kind of does their own thing, but there's enough like kind of hallmarks there that you buy these two guys becoming pretty much almost instant buddies. I mean, the way that they meet is you know, there's combat there and everything, but they pretty quickly like become prison break buddies, and they're like, all right, we're in this together. And I really liked the amount of humor that they were able to find in that relationship. I mean, that shower scene is hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
Who would have ever thought we were going to, and that's going to be a Lord and Miller thing. But that, and just even like the way that they broke out of prison and the questions it raises, like, was Chewbacca eating people down there? Like, what was going on?
Before
like,
porgs, there were
definitely being people up down there,
just like, you know. So yeah, there were a lot of like great little kind of funny bits that they've been between this movie and some of the other more recent Star Wars movies. Like they are realizing like, okay, Chewie, there's more to Chewie and we can do more things with him. And I love that, you know, I would love to see maybe the next movie can do this if they do one of like, get into the Wookiee stuff more of like, you know, kind of putting it out there like his people have been basically enslaved, and he's trying to get out there and free, and in this movie he helps free some of them, even though what's up with the one with the shaved face, like what happened there, buddy? Like,
well, we had a bunch of questions between like what happened to the Wookiees and Chewbacca specifically between the events between the events of Revenge of the Sith and Solo, because like clearly they were fighting back, and like just how much did the Empire sort of again
strike back?
There you go.
Okay, so maybe Chewbacca a Star Wars story in the future.
I mean,
I don't know.
Come on, you know.
So
a lot of subtitles.
I really like Chewbacca. But and maybe this is me again, just being like cheesy. I just loved how much they needed each other. You know what I mean? And just like you see that partnership. And it was so Han Solo to like, you know, he's like in this terrible situation. He's like, by the way, I can speak Shriwa. Like, I don't know. I was just like, of course, like Han Solo like somehow picked that up. But then, you know, they break out together. And then, you know, I really liked when they were on that like mining planet. And, you know, Chewbacca was free. He could have done whatever he wanted to, but for some reason felt this strong connection to Han. And I think that's so true of life. Like we find people we have instant connections with, and we find people who are like, man, like this is my partner. I feel drawn to this person for some reason. So maybe it was the Force, right?
That was great. Like they do show like Han Solo's, you know, for all, like, I mean, Kira, and we'll get to her in a second, but like Kira does kind of say something along the lines of like, I know the truth about you, that you're really a good guy. And like we, the audience, know that too by virtue of the other movies. But like it's interesting to see like Chewbacca and then of course Lando and their sort of what role that they play in his life and how they became important to him. And Lando, I think to a lesser degree, to me it was interesting to watch this movie and see sort of I knew, Lando's duplicitous and all that from Empire, but I think he was kind of frozen in my mind a little bit as, okay, at the end of Return of the Jedi, he's his buddy and they're all together. And so, yeah, forgetting kind of like, no, were they really friends until that? Like, or were they even like, did he not trust him really until he broke him out of Jabba's?
Which is very much where we are at the beginning, or at Empire when they first meet.
And just like him taking off with the Falcon, right when he's like about to like stand them down, and it's like he's out of there. It's like, all right,
that
that's
was
where
such a Han Solo moment and a Lando moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like both of those things happen. You're like, that's what would happen.
I'll just back up. I will say before we completely move on from Chewie, one of my favorite things about him was his introduction, though, because obviously like that scene where they throw Han down to be destroyed by this beast that's going to kill him is such a throwback to Return of the Jedi in its own way. Yeah. But I think it's like the first time in the movies that we see Wookiees as something truly terrible and to be feared, and that's something that is inferred like when people come across Wookiees in later movies, but again, we've never really seen it. So I liked that it's like starting Chewbacca as actually like a creature to be feared, and like in addition to Han's arc, which we talked about, we really needed to buy Chewie's arc of like why would he choose to stay with Han instead of going with the other Wookiees. And I don't know, like, I think that that's going to be something that people who were attached to this whole idea of, Chewie owing Han a life debt, which is what sort of the EU explanation for their partnership was. I think, I'm curious how they take it, but what did you guys think? Did you buy that arc, like why Chewie would want to stay with Han going forward?
I mean, I kind of said it earlier. I just think that there's people that you vibe with. I mean, and I think that they just, this is cheesy. I felt like it was the Force. Like, I do feel like Chewbacca had a choice, and he just was like, I can't leave this guy. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like we have that in everyday life. Like, you're like, meet someone at a coffee shop, and you're like, wow, that was a really cool person.
Just picturing like Chewie turning to Han and saying, Treewook, we vibe in.
Like, well, I wonder too, like how much of it is Chewie being kind of practical too, like, humans like to think all dogs are just instantly loyal to them. A lot of, and I don't mean to be reducing Chewie down to a dog, but just saying like,
he got an arc, he's a character.
But like, okay, this is, if I stick with this person, this is where the food comes in, this is where shelter comes in. But but I think that, he has his moment of like being, he could have been totally self-interested, but a noble self-interest. He wants to go help his people, but he sees this larger fight that's going on because the droids are uprising, and there's bad guys out there, and that makes him a hero. He stands up, and I really liked that. You get a sense of where this character who had never really, he had always been the sidekick, and it was just kind of there, and you kind of took him for granted. Like, they gave him something. That was cool.
All right, let's talk Lando, because that means that we're one step.
Talking Lando,
but that means we're one step closer to talking about my girl L3.
Okay. Oh yes. Okay. Yes. But everybody's talking about Lando. I mean, Donald Glover is just such a great actor. I think we knew he was going to own it. I mean, I hate to say this. I feel like he's essentially playing himself in a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
He was kind of like just like, I'm Captain Charisma, and I'm here to steal your movie.
Exactly.
I hate to say like he was born to play that role, but like the second they cast Donald Glover as Lando, however long ago that was at this point, like everyone was like, okay, And then you see him in the trailer and you're like, and then you see him in the movie, you're like, you're like, exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Like,
he was the one constant throughout this entire production where like nobody doubted. Like they're like, he'll deliver, and he does, and he's great. And I mean, I'd be curious to see, learn more about him. I mean, do you think that they didn't give him enough maybe in this movie, or was it just the right amount for y'all?
That's a tough question. I mean, I was just being silly and reading people's like Twitter reactions, and a lot of people felt like there wasn't enough Lando. But for me, I was such a huge Han Solo fan. Like, I really wanted to see a movie that was very focused on Han.
It's called Solo.
Yes, exactly. So for me, it was like, I thought that they did a great introduction of him. I thought he had a pretty big role in it. But I do know some people were like, man, he stole the show. You know what I mean? And they wanted to see more.
I think if you gave Lando any more, it would be a Lando movie. Like it's so on the brink of him like stealing the movie anyway. You don't really get too much to Lando's perspective, Lando's side of things. The thing, to your point earlier about like not fully seeing the Han arc play out, I actually felt like the Han Lando arc was the thing that I wish had played out more, and I understood a bit more of their pull and push or whatever. But I think, again, that's something clearly they're setting up for other
Raises a lot of questions about Lando, too, that I never thought I had.
Oh,
this
my
what does it mean?
But it gets us to a character I think we all loved. We weren't expecting this character to... This is the character I thought Solo chose.
Yeah,
Oh,
I fully
L3,
agree.
without question. I mean, I literally was just like, okay, I'll be another cute, fun droid, right? I mean, like, I feel like we're so used to seeing them popping up in these movies now, but man, L3, like, stole it for me. I mean, she's easily my favorite droid now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about the people watching at home, but I know for us, we walked out of the movie and we were like, what does it mean that it works?
Yeah.
And has Lando been screwing robots? And the answer is yes. The answer is like definitively yes.
Oh.
And like people have come out, like the writers are like, oh yeah, that's what it means. You talk to Phoebe.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Glover was like, yes, Lando loved L3, which I thought, you know, he could have left that up in the air, and I felt that that was really cool that he was like, no, he loved L3. And then I asked Phoebe, what did she mean when she said it works? And she's like, I'll leave that to your imagination. But I think we all know what that's insinuating.
I just, like, I freaking loved this character. And it's funny because, like, obviously we spent a lot of time talking about Alden, about the characters who are returning. But for the new characters, like, you know, we'll get to Kira and Beckett and everyone, but like to me, L3 is the one who just shone the brightest. And I thought she was really interesting and dynamic, and like, you know, Star Wars movies aren't inherently political movies, but
They're becoming more so.
they are. But I thought like just seeing a completely different perspective to droids through her and the world
really,
through her, and like again, like even through their relationship, how he didn't like, you know, fix her and make her not have her own individual personality.
He's like, it's creepy though. You stop and you're like, basically, is he? I know this is a loaded question. We don't have time to delve into it, but is he like a slave owner who's doing his slave? Like
no, because I think
L3 could have left at any time.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is that they like she's a consenting she's like a consenting droid, and I don't mean in a sexual nature. I mean like her whole thing is, you know, looking at these other droids and seeing the restraint bolts and seeing what the Empire is doing with them, and raising just this whole perspective on the way droids are treated within the Star Wars universe. And suddenly you think about it and you're like, okay, R2, C3PO. These are
bastards.
Well, I am like, again, I'm using the term like consenting droids because they're choosing to be with these humans. They are partners in the way Chewie chooses to be with Han.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, it's just this really fascinating new layer to it. And I just thought, I thought Phoebe Waller-Bridges did like such a beautiful job with this performance in a franchise just overrun with like fun, playful droids. Like we love BB-8 and BB-9E and everything, and K2SO, who is sort of the snarky version. But
he was like the predecessor in personality-wise.
She was a character, and I really loved her.
The complete opposite of C3PO. Like I thought they were like polar opposites. You know what I mean? Like she was mouthy, said exactly what she thought. And then she even just the way that she walked. I mean. I just thought it was cool.
Line of butter or whatever it was, or something, or like walking her way like that.
And she was hilarious. I mean, C3PO is hilarious too, but I mean, like she just was like sassy and had an attitude, and I really can't recall any other droids where like I would say that.
Now, I have a lingering question about this now. Like, so her consciousness is basically put into the nav system.
Yeah.
Her programming and becomes that. So, is she still in the Falcon?
I assume so, yeah.
But then it takes, like Han getting the ship, that's like him running off with what's left of the woman he Lando loved, and like it's got a whole new like there's all this
there's
like
so many
can
layers
of worms
now.
that's open.
Go back and rewatch Empire and see how, because Lando sort of talks about the ship as like his lost love sort of thing. I mean, it is interesting because I came out of it and I'm like, you know, there is the funny line that L3 has where she's like, I think he's getting too attached, essentially. But knowing that like there was this love, I don't know. I think it adds like a really interesting depth to that whole relationship.
I'll never look at Luke and R2 the same way.
Oh no! I don't think it's in like a sick and appropriate way. I think it is in like a sweet way.
I think what was just so cool about it was that I was really expecting nothing from L3, and I walked out of it being a huge fan.
Oh yeah.
We are talking about some of the new characters, though. Kind of on the other side of things, I felt like Kira left a lot to be desired. I know, Jim, you and I have been saying that a bit in our post-solo discussions. So.
Well, I thought that I thought that I got sort of the tropes that they were going for with the character, like trying to make her a film noir, femme fatale, like you know, the tough guy, you know, the girl betrays him, and you know, not to, you know, my point earlier about Han was that I wanted to see him hardened by life and by sort of like heartbreak or whatever, but I thought maybe one reason why that didn't work for me, or I felt like that arc was unsatisfactory, was that they didn't quite get her character down right, like it on a writing level. And then, you know, I like Emilia Clarke on Game of Thrones, but she still seems kind of miscast in other things, and I thought she didn't quite capture, I think, the sort of internal life and the sort of, not to sound all douchey about it, but like that sort of like other things going on inside of her the way that they could have, especially if they're hinting at her having to be a survivor and all this dark stuff that she had to do.
What did she do?
What happened?
Yeah,
Like, it was so
exactly,
shallow.
you
Yeah,
know.
I agree.
Yeah, I think for me, Kira is the thing that probably didn't work the most to the points that you were saying, Jim. I like Emilia Clarke, and I thought she gave a charming performance, but I don't think a charming performance is necessarily what was right here. I thought that we were told a lot of things about Kira, but we never actually saw them, if that makes sense. Like we kept being told that she'd done these terrible things, but even when we were talking, like sort of prepping for this beforehand, we weren't quite sure what they were, what they did. And so we're supposed to buy this arc, and you know, I can see how it was crafted, and I can see it sort of in the writing laid down, how Kira is going through an arc in this movie, you know, that Han misses, but we as the audience see, so that by the time that we get to the end of the movie and she makes that choice, she lets them go, but then she goes to Maul, which is still so crazy, but like she makes that choice, we can understand that arc. But I just didn't buy it enough, and I think it's because there wasn't really enough range in what we saw of Kira in the movie. She seemed pretty fine, like she seemed like a nice lady. We didn't see her do anything too terrible.
Pretty well adjusted, all things considered, for all the bad stuff that happened to her. I think maybe if she had been sort of a little more streetwise, a little harder, a little tougher, then she still seemed like the girl he left, the girl who was taken away.
Exactly.
And like I wanted to see the
like
kind of
flashes
cause
of
and
brutality
effects.
or
You know,
something.
it's more than just a wrist tattoo. All that tells me is she went to Coachella. I don't know.
I know. Well, you know, it's interesting because when they had that closet scene and she's like, I've done things, I was expecting her to be like, you know, not just to make out with him after. I want her to be like, no, dude, you left me. I'm pissed off about this. Like,
but she like
show
wasn't
some,
even.
But that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
it's like you were talking about that missing element. Like, when do we see Kira be evil? Like, if she was like, dude, you know what I went through? Like, I had to. I mean, I'm completely conjecturing here, but what if she was like, I had to prostitute myself to be with Dryden Voss, or I've been
what's
having to work
implied,
for this
basically,
awful.
right?
Like, she never gets mad, and it's like, dude, like I wanted to see the
you
evil
don't
light up in her eyes, like just once, even if it was for a little bit. And then he grabbed her and was like, I love you, I'm sorry. Like and then it could have been like, oh, okay, now I know where their romance is coming from, and like he's calming her down, but like show me her anger, and we never
Some sort of
saw that. What happened to
psychological
her?
effect that it had on her, I think, would have done more to like allay some of my, you know, feelings I had about the movie of kind of missing its mark. But it's, I think, her character is really interesting as an idea, but the execution of it,
Totally.
the
100%.
writing of it, like if you really think about choices, all the choices she makes until the last 10 minutes are all stuff that happens kind of off screen, or she's just told to go and do it. Like even getting on the ship with Han and them to do the job, well, she didn't really have a choice, did she? Because otherwise Dryden was going to kill everybody.
And even like the betraying back and forth thing, like, I don't know, I didn't fully buy it to your point of like her being evil. I would have liked to see flashes of that, but this is a family movie, right? Ultimately, like, and Disney can only skirt so close to
right.
some of
Maybe
those
that would
darker
be
Anakin
elements.
did stuff, and like we still
agreed.
followed him. Like
Yes.
The
poor
younglings.
Sand people.
So maybe
I
she
mean,
didn't
come
have
on.
to say like what she went through, but show that and be like, you don't know what
I
I've
got two
been
words:
through.
sand people.
Yeah,
that's what I
no,
meant.
I mean, like, you never see that moment where, like, you know, we've all seen good performances, and you're like, whoa, that just hit me to my core.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't have to say anything, but I knew she has gone through something. That never happened.
And I
for me.
agree with you because, like, again, like I can see it. I can see what was intended there. It's Han is still holding her up, idealizing her as the woman he left behind, the woman motivating him throughout all of this journey. And I think when she's with him, she like she likes that he still sees her that way, and she likes that he doesn't see her as the person that she knows she has become. But I just wish we got to see the person that she had become, because it makes the ending that much more impactful. And even, you know, I get, like, she's a survivor. That's the thing I understood the most about her character, is she will do what it takes to survive, no matter the cost. And that makes her hard in a way that Han hasn't quite become. But I still don't really understand, like, what is her purpose? Like, what is her purpose of joining Darth Maul at the end, and like where she go other than surviving
Darth Maul.
I already freaked. I had a quiet moment of freak out about.
You know,
Darth
Jim,
Maul.
you're talking about, or earlier you were talking about how Alden's Han like kind of lacked that hardness, I guess, and I feel like if that scene had played out when they're in the closet, if she had just like gotten mad at him, and then you just saw how sad he was, like that he messed up with her, that was missing.
Things like that. Just plant the seeds. Okay, if this isn't going to be a one-story arc, if they're going to basically take Casino Royale and make it 3 movies, then I needed to see more groundwork being done. But they were so invested in sort of the serial pacing of it, of just going to the next beat and the next joke, and that those punches, when they had to land, just didn't land. And I think maybe a different actress being cast, there's still something very youthful and bubbly and sweet and fun about Emilia Clarke that you don't really, I didn't get a sense of the journey that she had been on. Everything was talked about or done to her or happened off screen.
Wanted that Dracarys moment, you know, where it's like, drop the mic, drop the mic, Dragon Queen.
I kind of want to defend Emilia a little bit here. I feel like she did a very good job, but I feel like we just didn't have that moment written in, so she didn't even have the time to do that. Because I mean, she could have been like, oh, I'm charming and bubbly and sophisticated, and then like you just see for that second, you left me, like. If that was there, then I would have been like,
Mall. Like they're gonna be like, they can turn it on when they want to.
Exactly.
But they still know they can get you killed.
And we never turned it on.
And we also, the other thing that's missing is like maybe she was just playing Han the whole time to get what she wanted at the end. Maybe.
Sting.
But again, like that doesn't really play out. And we do see those flashes, you know, when she like shows what a badass she is. But I didn't see that as a sign of her being evil or having this malicious, self-serving intent.
Even like she just seemed like, I have a really bad job. Look, I'm out there, I'm temping now, and I'm like I didn't. I wanted things to land more, and you didn't really get that with that. And because if that heartbreak, if that thing that's supposed to mean the most to Han, if that didn't work, then to me fundamentally a lot of things about the movie didn't work, but it got by on like a charm and a sort of a bravado and all those personality traits of Han Solo, like the movie kind of had. But like, I think that's ultimately kind of why what stuck in my craw about the movie.
And it's interesting because like I walked out of this movie being like, I liked the new characters, and I thought the old characters, you know, they did a good job with. But the more I think about it and I'm talking about it, the more I realize, okay, with the exception of L3, who I love, and like
we loved L3.
wins all the new characters for me. Like the more I think about it, even, you know, we're talking about Kira so much, and I think she probably works even better than Beckett and Val and some of those other characters.
We've gone to that,
So I do guess now that I'm thinking about it, I really did enjoy the new spins on characters I knew better than having any of these new characters be especially memorable. And I'm curious if other people agree, or you're walking out and you're like, no, Val for life, she's like, or like Beckett or something.
Lando's heartbreak shouldn't have registered more than Han's.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
no,
ultimately,
100%
like,
agree. I mean, that hit me a lot more. I totally agree. I'm talking about missing the mark a little bit. You brought up Val. I wanted her to be so cool. I wanted to have like this like complete.
I thought she'd be more than the first
it was
act.
just like, it was like, I mean, she was cool. I don't want to take that away from her, but it was just like so short, and I was like, what? Like, you know what I mean? It was like over before I knew it.
Because like, oh, she's a well-known actor. If they if we kill her off, then anything is possible. But like, I don't know if that was the idea.
That's a good point, actually.
If that was the idea, though, we all know like we're never going to see most of these characters again. We know who's walking out of this movie alive. So it's like, I don't know if that was the gimmick behind her casting, because she's a great actress.
Yes.
And they didn't give her anything. She has that the campfire scene. Her and Chuck Wagon Bob there. They forearms.
John
Chucky.
Favreau.
Yeah, I know. Ray, Roy, Ray, Rio. Cuban Bob, whatever his name was. Like, you know, like.
You mean not the most memorable character in this movie? It was interesting. I'm going to give a hat tip to our producer, Tom, who brought up a good point. You know, the Val-Beckett relationship is very much intended to be a foil to Han and Kira's relationship. And I guess maybe if we're following it down that logical path and having Val die so early on in this movie is maybe a lesson to Han that, you know, his relationship is ill-fated, that this sort of, you know, idealist love story that he has planned out in his head where he and Kira run off together is ill-fated. But I just don't think, you know, if that was maybe the intention there of that dualism, that foil of relationships, I didn't think that it really played out that effectively. And I did think, you know, if any of the new characters we can be critical of, I think I would be most critical of the treatment of her, because it felt like
so rushed.
And maybe this is me paying too much attention to the marketing that I thought she would be more than she ended up being, but I thought she was more of like a functional character to like set people on their path instead of being like a well-rounded, interesting character. I just would have liked to see more than her. I really liked her.
Too, like, you know, like
I really liked her when she was on screen for 5 minutes.
I would have liked to have seen sort of like, okay, if they were setting it up like, you know, Han, the way he looks at them together, this sort of wistful kind of romantic thing of like, oh, like, I want that. Like, this could be the model of what Kira and I will be like. And I'm reading into this, but that's, you know, like, you know, she and I could be like kind of Bonnie and Clyde of the galaxy far, far away thing. If that's what they were going for, and that sort of like foreshadowing sort of the tragedy of that relationship by looking at those two, they didn't really sell that. And you know, you need to, if that's kind of what you're going for, and that's the emotional gut punch you want us to have, like, you really have to make sure those land.
And now we're going, I mean, now I'm getting a little like film school analysis of Solo, but like it is interesting now that I think about that scene and like the way Beckett's story sort of played out. The great tragedy of Han Solo is that he ends up becoming Beckett in a lot of ways, and that that whole idea of there's always one more job, that like I will have this happy ending, just one job away, and there always is yeah, I guess so actually, but there always is like one more job for Han, and that
one more debt to be paid. Like there's definitely like, you know, if you get in this, you're in it for life. Like I think it would have been, Jackie, maybe you can talk to this a little more, but like the character of Beckett, you know, he is in a lot of ways, again, like kind of an archetypal character.
Yeah, intentionally
grizzled
so,
mentor.
I think, yeah.
And I think like part of this movie is relying on stuff that we're already bringing in. Like, frankly, I've seen Woody play characters like that before. Like, he kind of played it in Zombieland. He kind of was that kind of character in the Hunger Games movies. So I feel like they were getting away on a shorthand where I think if there was an actor in there that I didn't really know their stuff, like, I think it might have worked even better for me, because I would have been like, well, will this guy turn on him, or will he stick around? Like, I feel like because it was Woody and I've seen him play these characters, I kind of knew where they were going to go.
Yeah, but that didn't bother me. I mean, like, I felt like, you know, when Woody Harrelson's just like so callous and he's like, I told you, like, don't trust anybody. That was the young Han, like, holding on to hope that, like, hey, maybe I'm like, I've never had, I mean, again, this is me just completely conjecturing here. Like, here's this father figure, and maybe he isn't a great guy, but hey, maybe he cares about me the way that I care about him. And then in the end, you know, Woody Harrelson's character is just like, no, I told you not to trust anybody. And that's a little bit of Han Solo's soul being crushed.
Because Han does name check his dad or something at some point, right? And doesn't he mention something about his dad?
Yes, and he says,
it's like a
but it's like, here's
name,
like, you know, father figure, maybe even like a mentor or a friend, and like I do feel like you knew that was gonna happen. You knew that Beckett was gonna like betray him or like hurt him in some way. But I mean, like that was a punch that I thought landed for me.
Yeah, and I sort of disagree with you on saying I would have rather had it be someone else. I was fine with Woody being Woody. Like, I thought he was exactly what this role needed to be in his performance, and sort of being that person who started Han down the path that we know he takes. I just think that Beckett is ultimately more interesting when you think of how his story and his relationship with Han impacted Han instead of as a character on his own. Like, I don't think Beckett is going to make it in my ranking of the top 200 Star Wars characters.
There's a hell of
that's
a
good
Easter egg reference.
yeah.
I mean, my ears perked up at that. I'm like, wow.
That's
okay.
Simon Kinberg
Mad
like pulling
respect.
the
Yeah,
strings
exactly.
behind the scenes of like
Lacing
tying
in that
everything
fan
in
service,
together.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to skip to fan service. That is definitely something that we're going to talk about. But quickly, I do want to talk about everything going on with the directors, right? So Ron Howard took over. Did you guys feel like this is two separate films? What were your thoughts about that?
Actually, you go.
Yeah, I actually walked out of this movie surprised that it felt like a very coherent, solid, single film. Like we've part of our job causes us to be very aware more than maybe your average, audience member of all the drama that goes on behind the scenes. So worst case scenario in a movie that has had a lot of hands in the pot is that it feels like an amalgamation of a bunch of different movies. I didn't feel that here. Part of it might have been because Ron Howard really took control, reshot it, made the movie in his image instead of originally it was Lord and Miller, the directors of the Lego Movie, among other very, very funny properties who were making it. And theirs was apparently very much like an improv-based type film, whereas I think, with Kathleen Kennedy bringing in Ron Howard, they wanted a film that was a coherent, like plot-driven movie that you didn't sort of put it together in the edit. And walking out of this movie, I understood the need for that. Like they had very clear markers that they wanted to hit with this journey that I think having that sort of jokey aspect or, we would come along to the story along the way in the shoot, if those reports are to be believed, wouldn't have had happen. My point being, I did feel like this was a single film. I really enjoyed it, and I didn't feel like it was sort of a put together like Play-Doh mess of a movie.
Not to rag on DC or anything like that, but it's like I thought Justice League had a similar thing where there was a director switch and a lot of things were reshot, and there was kind of an identity crisis a little bit in that movie, not as bad as it could have been, where it looked one way but sounded another. And I didn't get anything like that here. It did feel very much like a whole movie, and it didn't feel like it was something that had jarring inconsistencies in terms of tone or style or even just what the intentions were, even if I disagree with some of the intentions. So you definitely never felt the trauma or the drama behind the scenes kind of seep into the movie.
The only thing that I might feel is caused from these two sort of mashed up visions of the movie is some of those characters like lacking the bite. Like we were talking about Kira and also Dryden Voss, the villain in the movie. Like
he was recast, right?
Right, yeah, he was recast from the original actor who was supposed to play him, but like I feel like some of those things didn't land as effectively, maybe as a result of changes needing to be made, and like they obviously did a lot of reshoots, so maybe they got what they needed. But that's the only thing that I can imagine, and maybe that's again at the top of this. If we didn't lose you just saying we thought the movie was fine, I think that might be part of that cause. And I wonder, I wonder in future movies, if they do make future Han Solo movies, like how, if they stick with one director, how the like clarity of intent from one director might impact like that story again feeling
Maybe
even
they'll
more
just
whole.
do like anthology films, and each director gets to do a chapter or something
How many
like
Star
that.
Wars movies are we going to make, right?
That would actually be a really cool concept. But I would like to see what Ron Howard would have done completely on his own. You know, because you do know that he just like inherited kind of probably a lot, you know what I mean? And then he had to just kind of put it together. I'm not saying it was bad to start with. I don't know. I just wonder what his perspective is. Like, man, I could work on a Star Wars movie. Oh wait, what? All this is done. Now I gotta I just can't imagine what he was thinking. I mean, I'm wearing the shirt. I'm a big fan of it. I thought that he did a great job. And I did sit down with him and I asked him, I'm like, hey, would you do another one? And he said, it depends on the fans. So if they end up liking this, then maybe we'll see him again and we'll see what he does with him when it's like completely his baby. But
I'm going to toss that to the fans, to the people watching. Like, do you guys agree with us? Did you feel like you could feel Lord and Miller's vision sort of conflicting with Ron Howard's? And also, is there, I don't mean to pit them one versus the other, but is there one version that you would have liked to see more where you're really happy with Ron Howard's, or do you wish we got sort of the jokier improv Lord and Miller version?
I'm sorry, I'm kind of like going off again. I mean, the only time it really it seemed to me that there was, I'm like, okay, this might have just been filled in, was the war scene, because like we said, like there wasn't a lot of background and it was super foggy, but I ended up loving that because it showed, again, a little bit of how Han Solo was broken down a little bit more, and then obviously like a great connection between him and Chewie, but I was kind of like, wow, this looks like it might have just been put together at the last second.
Sets up the Empire too, which, you know, and those kind of overarching kind of elements that will play out throughout Star Wars, but yeah, and that
We've never seen anyone recruited actively before to be
and we find out how we got his name. I mean, imagine if you got a recruiter with a different vocabulary. Okay, Han Lonely. You know, it's like, really, that's how we got his name? Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I do want to talk about fan service. I mean, I wrote down a bunch of little things down here. You talked about Bossk, Jim, sticking out to you. Do you want to start?
Yeah, look, I love Bossk. He's a lizard in a flight suit who's a bounty hunter. And he doesn't wear boots. It's just all lizard feet. I'm like, come on, that's cool. I want a Bossk movie. I know you're all laughing, except for that one other guy out there that totally wants that. But yeah, I love the Bossk reference, and that, you know, came from Val, and then like the Aurra Sing reference, and all those kind of ways that it ties in. And then obviously like the huge gasping moment of it's Darth Maul, like, you know, like he's finally back on live action. Like, I will admit, I haven't really seen a lot of the Star Wars animated series, and how they, I can't really speak to a lot of that.
Here's actually what I think is coolest about the Darth Maul thing. I know, like, I can't believe we're talking about Darth Maul again.
I know,
like,
I just like got chills. I was like, yes, Darth Maul, yeah.
But I think the coolest thing about this, and again, I mentioned Simon Kinberg earlier, he's a producer on this movie. He is a producer on Star Wars Rebels as well, and he's actually writing his own Star Wars movie additionally. So this is where I feel sort of his pulling the strings at work. Star Wars, there is like this Star Wars writers group that works on all these stories together, the comics, the live action movies, you know, everything, to pull them all together. And what's interesting to me about Darth Maul is this is the first time really in one of the live action movies that the events of one of the sort of like, I'll call them like tangential stories, like the comics and Rebels and Clone Wars, is so incredibly important and relevant to understanding the plot of the live action movie, because so many people, and we trust us, we have a full breakdown on IGN.com. You can check out explaining how this happened. But like, so many people are going to walk out of this movie being like, didn't he die in a movie, Phantom Menace, before the events of this movie? And the answer to that is in the side stories, like in Clone Wars and Rebels. And I just think that's fascinating that they could just drop in this character who's gone on this entire journey that you can find the answers for. It's such an ad, a commercial essentially, for really watching those. But you walk out and you're like, wait, Darth Maul? Like, I love that character. Like, you know, whatever he was in Phantom Menace, I want to find out what happens. And honestly, I also, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but like, I also think that this is such a cool opportunity for them to sort of give that character something more to do if they do make another solo movie.
It's a really interesting kind of door that they open there.
I look back at Phantom Menace and I'm like, he's sort of the Boba Fett of the prequels, right? Where it's like you introduce this character that's so cool and then you totally wasted them.
Yeah, and he didn't even talk, and he's like the coolest weapon.
And now Sam Witwer is talking.
That was the other thing.
20 years from now, Captain Phasma will show up. Oh my
God, and then they'll do like the ultimate like extended remastered George Lucas edition where they put her good death scene into the movie.
I just wanted to hear the music where it was like duh duh duh, like when he came up, because I literally was like, is that Darth Maul? But I thought they did a great job with the fan service. I know this is kind of silly, but it stuck out to me when Tobias Beckett was wearing the outfit.
Lando's
I was like, oh, he's just got that in Millennium Falcon
for like
however many years. 30 years.
Where's the old costume bag? Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. I just thought that.
And there's
was
like
really
Mandalorian armor in the back of a Dryden, like in that fight scene at the end as well. Yeah.
And just all the allusions to the Hutts too. Like they never say. They keep saying, oh, there's this dude on Tatooine, like the guy that nobody wants to cross.
That's your sequel
setup. And I think it's kind of interesting too that, you know, my understanding, forgive me if I'm wrong, but that the character that Bettany was playing, and our producer Tom kind of filled me in on this, that character was meant to be sort of a creature character, and would have been like a mocap thing, and because of the reshoots and the truncated schedule, became a human with some like markings and stuff. But it's kind of interesting. It's like a reverse Boba Fett, where in the original one, he was just a fat guy that was like bugging Han Solo for money, and then they turn him into, but they didn't have the money to do it as a creature, and then so when you get to him in Jedi, he's the creature. And I'm like, yeah, I just thought it was kind of funny that it's like, it's kind of a reversal of fortune there. Right?
Yeah.
So.
You're talking about Jabba.
Jabba. Yes. I just spent 30 seconds talking about a guy who's only talked about not even by name in this movie. So that's time well spent.
I think the biggest disappointment easily, though, is no Mala. Right? I mean, like, we were all hoping that.
Yeah. So we thought that the Wookiee who you see in the trailer might be Mala, the wife of Chewbacca from the holiday special. And I gotta tell you guys, we had like so many follow-ups planned. We were like, if Mala is canon, we were gonna take
Lumpy
a list of Ron Howard and be like, what else from the holiday special is canon? And then that wasn't even who it was. So that's my greatest. I agree. That's my greatest disappointment.
Kind of a bummer, yeah.
But here's a question. Like, do you guys think that the fan service went too far? Like, did we need to know where Han got his blaster? Did we need to see the Sabacc game where he won the Falcon? Or were those the things that you really wanted to see in a Han Solo movie?
I think the Sabacc game is it plays a function in the plot too, and it's to show that look what Lando's good at, or is he, because he's a cheat, so that helps establish his character. The blaster thing was a nice touch. I mean, it's like, again, like back to Batman Begins or Casino Royale, like, you know, all right, it's that moment where he gets the Batarang or he gets the Walther PPK, and but it's a moment. It's not like a huge thing that has to that the whole movie lives or dies by. I mean, if they really wanted to be over the top with fan service, in that big fight with Dryden Voss at the end where he's got a blade, I was kind of expecting, like, okay, and here's where he gets the scar in his chin. And they didn't do that. And I was glad that they didn't, because I was like, okay,
maybe too much.
They're setting that up, like, here we go. Like, you know, so that was kind of nice that they reeled it in enough to be like, oh, okay, let's just, you know, a little touch is enough.
The only thing I felt like I could have lost was I didn't need, like, how he got his last name. He could have just been Han Solo. He could have been raised as that.
That was a little cheesy.
Yeah. But everything else, I mean, I sort of, again, like I went into this movie not necessarily asking a lot of these questions and needing answers for them. So, but I did think that they added enough new to like understanding Han Solo that it didn't feel entirely like.
I have a feeling this Solo line was probably something really played for laughs in the Lord and Miller thing, where the guy doesn't say Solo, he probably says something else. He's like, I don't like that name. We're working on it. Like, I could see them trying to do that moment and subvert expectations, and this one kind of embraced those expectations in that moment. But in terms of other fan service, like, I thought that they established enough of sort of the vibe of the larger Star Wars universe, and some of it with, I think I'm going to get her name right, but the Enfys Nest character, like sort of setting up, like planting the seeds of, oh, this is the rebellion, and that Han may have kind of unintentionally helped them kind of get bankrolled for their fight against
intentionally by the end.
Yeah, but that's sort of like, he probably thinking, they'll try and pull a job and they'll all get killed, and not realizing, like, it's gonna, with the role it will have in his life. But yeah, I think there were enough little moments in there.
Can I tell you the one thing I think they could have underlined better?
What?
So, we know that the Millennium Falcon was the ship that did the Kessel Run in under 12 parsecs, right? And this movie establishes that parsecs is a measure of distance and not time. But I do think, still, like, he takes the shortcut, and I think they really could have underlined it just a little bit more, that it was like, look how short our path was, or something like that. Like, I think he goes on the Kessel Run, there's the whole, like, monster black hole thing, and then they come out of it. But that's, like, that's the thing. The Kessel Run is the thing, sort of. Like, that's your climax.
And he didn't really win the Kessel Run. He kind of cheated, and ultimately...
Which is fine.
Ultimately, Beckett is the one who put the boost in the tank. Han was just at the wheel.
Which is fine, but I'm just like, if you're gonna go 90% of the way there, go the extra 10% and nail it, and make sure when my mom or uncle or cousin, baby cousin who's like never seen a Star Wars movie, I'm making the people up at this point, but like when they see this movie, I want them to come out and be like, he did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just like putting my little
like
whatever hat on, and no one else agrees with me, which is also fine.
But there were some things too, like where if you over-explain it too much, it loses the mystique. And I think the movie was trying to walk that line, but no, because like I feel like with Star Trek, I know I'm bringing that thing into it, but like when they finally showed how Kirk cheated and won the Kobayashi Maru, it's kind of like, it'll never quite match up to the story that's in the fans' head, you know? And like the Kessel Run, like, you know, now finally seeing what it was, and then like seeing that it was sort of the ship only won it because it had a boost and all that kind of thing. Like, I don't know. I guess I just kind of maybe less would have been more in that regard. But
Okay.
we'll see. We'll see.
Last question.
Yes.
So, do you guys want a Solo sequel? Do you want it?
Yeah.
I think you would be down?
Yeah. I want to see the Jabba story.
I mean, I'm a fan. We already know. I want to see a buddy cop movie with Lando and Han. It's just a Chewbacca Star Wars story. Like, I'm a big fan of like delving deeper. What about you, though?
I don't know. I honestly don't. Like, I really like Alden's Han Solo. I think there are ways you can do more stories with that character that don't necessarily have to be slavishly setting up getting to New Hope. I know he's supposed to be younger than Harrison Ford, but if we're going to just buy that he is the new Han Solo, then guess what? I'll buy that he's Han Solo 5 years after Jedi. Like, I would really like to see them, if they're going to bring these characters back, tell us stories where I don't quite know the outcome of the story. Like, I don't know that he has to get to Tatooine, be in that canteen to have these two people walk in and hire him for a job that changes his life. Like, that's why if they do a Lando movie, I know Tom Jorgensen, our producer, really wants the Cloud City story. I personally would love to see sort of like, well, what happened to Lando after Return of the Jedi? Like, take me on an adventure where, what are some characters he's going to meet or things that will affect him? Because, like, that's a big question since he's not in episode 7, 8, and 9. Like, what happened to Lando?
Where
Tell me stories about that. You know?
Yeah, again, like I'll say it again. Like, I woke up the morning of going to see this movie and said, like, am I actually excited? Meh. And then came out being like, you know what? You guys laid a couple threads that we could follow in other movies, and I would want to see Han's job with Jabba, because that's always been a question. I want to see what's coming next with Kira and Crimson Dawn and Darth Maul. Is he technically still a Darth at
How
this
did
point?
Jabba
Yeah.
make
Maul,
Salacious
yeah.
be Crumb? I mean, that's a burning
No, but
question I want an answer.
those
Mr.
are
Maul
threads.
now.
I'm like, I see how you're setting up 3 movies. I think that this movie could just be it on its own, and those could be things that we question and speculate on in our heads, but don't actually need answers to. But I would see another movie. I am sort of loath to go too far down, like, do we need these sort of explanation movies for every single character? We know Rian Johnson is working on movies set beyond the galaxy, we know. And I think that there's a lot of stories to be told there instead of just with characters that are familiar to us.
You know what's been the most surprising for me is just how long we've talked about this. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I was kind of like, I went into that movie again, arms crossed, like, I really just thought it was gonna be bad. I really did. I just didn't have a good feeling about it when I watched the movie clips. I mean, I love Han Solo. It's just like, why are they doing this? And I left really loving the movie. And then I'm just like totally like psyched about all the conversations that we're having about this. Like, our producer over there has been like rapping like this entire time. But it's like, that is something that I'm like, wow, this movie is getting people talking. Like, that's great.
I do want to see it again and see like little things maybe I missed or whatever, or see how I felt about it, because movies, your feelings about them do evolve over time. The movies you didn't like, you start to appreciate more. Movies you loved, you start seeing the flaws. I mean, that's just life, that's art, whatever, So I'm curious to revisit the movie, see how I still feel about it. But yeah, I think it's considering how wildly bad this movie could have gone. The fact that they turned in an entertaining film that, sure, it's not everything for everyone, but it's not going to sink Star Wars, and it was a fun time.
Yeah, and I'll leave sort of my thoughts on this. Like, I think that the fun of Star Wars from the very beginning is that, when George Lucas released Star Wars back when it was just Star Wars, Empire, like, you meet these characters. You meet a character like Boba Fett or all these bounty hunters that are being sent after Han Solo, and every single one of them could have their own interesting story. Like, you want to follow every single one of those characters, and I think that this movie did a great job of introducing a wealth of new characters who not only immediately feel true to Star Wars canon, but also, like, any single one of them. Like, I would have followed a prequel about Val and Beckett before we got to this point to know them more. I would follow, the characters at Lando's casino or whatever and find out what their story was before that. And I think that that's a huge accomplishment and a testament to the Star Wars Story Group having telling sort of a cohesive vision of how all these different Star Wars TV shows and comics and movies fit together, games. So yeah, I'm excited about more Star Wars, and I think this is a step in the right direction if they're going to keep sort of telling these stories that are side stories to the main Skywalker trilogy.
Okay, awesome spoiler cast, you guys, and we want to know what you at home think. Make sure you put your opinions in the comments section, and do not forget to check out Jim's review. We also have a really fun video where the actor who plays Chewie is translating Shriwook and some of those epic Star Wars scenes. So make sure to follow and subscribe to IGN wherever you want to watch.